This video covers assignment 18.8. We're going to work 5 problems together, and you're going to work the rest on your own. So we're going to start with problem 5 on that front page. And they ask us which function is equivalent to y equals 3 parentheses x plus 2 squared plus 7. So in class, the fastest way we talked about was plugging your original equation into y equals, and then plugging your A, B, C, and D answer choices into y2 one at a time. And what we're looking for is 2 equal graphs. And we talked about the word equal means the same. So if the graphs are the same, that means we will only see one function. Now, the one thing I asked you to do is if you use this method, I asked you to promise me that you will check all 4 answer choices before circling an answer, okay? So here's option A. We click graph, and I only see one graph. It's still thinking. Okay, I only see one graph, so option A is an option. B. I changed that y-intercept to 19 instead of 33. I click graph. And I only see one option. Okay, so let's look at C. You take out that middle term, 3x squared plus 19. Here's my graph. And I only see one graph. And then for option D, I click graph. And I only see one function. So what's happening here is if I didn't keep checking, I would think A was my correct answer. A, B, C, and D all gave me one function. That means I need to click zoom and out. And then I click enter to see my full function. So here's one. Oh, right up here. I don't know if you caught it, but this right up here is where my second function is. And remember, I still have D plugged in, so I'm going to mark out D. So let's go back to C. Click graph. Here's my first function. Oh, there's a second one. So C is not correct. Also, remember, you can look at the table. You would need these y values to be the same. So if you're having trouble seeing them, you can use a table and compare your y values. So then let me type in A. I click graph. There's my first graph. Oh, there's another one. So A is not correct, so let's hope B is correct. There's my first graph. We're still thinking. We're thinking. I don't see another graph. Let me go to the table to confirm and look at your y values. All of these y values are exactly the same. So this problem is all in the calculator, and it's not super tricky as long as you will check all of the answers, and if you don't see what you're looking for, zoom out or use a table. Okay, we're going to flip a couple pages to problem 11. Problem 11 says a system of equations is graphed on the grid. Which system of equations does the graph represent? So if you notice, all of your A, B, C, D answer choices are in graphing form, which is great because they've given us graphs. So we have a couple different ways we can attack this. They've given us 2 points on each graph. So if you're a stat edit kind of person, you can use stat calc and see if your answer choices could be knocked off that way. You could also look at your y-intercept. So one of my y-intercepts has to be a positive 4. This one does not have any positive 4s. This does not have any positive 4s. This has a positive 4, and this has a positive 4. And then my other y-intercept is a negative 4. So D would have to be my correct answer. Also, you could take 2 of these points. I took these 2 and put them in stat edit. I got the equation x plus 4. And the only time that shows up is answer choice D. So a couple different ways you could solve that. This one is a system, but the question is not really about the system of equations. It's just about the equations that are on there, not necessarily anything about the solution. So keep that in mind. Turn the page or the packet to number 14. A college student has 2 different jobs. Her combined work schedules consist of no more than 48 hours in 1 week. Which graph best represents the solution set for all possible combinations of X, the number of hours she worked at her first job, and Y, the numbers that she worked at her second job in 1 week? Now remember, key thing here, she is not working more than 48 hours in 1 week. That's at both jobs. So graph A is saying if she works 48 hours at the second job, she would work 0 hours at the first, which would make sense because that would be a total of 48 hours. Or if she works all 48 at the first, she will work none of the second. That makes sense. On C, they have where you could be working more than 48 hours. So C would not be an option for this situation. Similarly with D, they're saying up here that you could work more than 48 hours at the second job. Not an option. B has you working at 48 at both jobs. However, if you notice where the shading is above the 48, meaning like up here you could work 54 hours at your second job. Well, she's not going to do that. So A is going to be my correct answer. So that one's kind of a weird one, but all you have to do is read and look at the graphs. Remember, the shading is your solution set, so that does make a difference between A and B. Let's turn to problem 17. This one says the graph of the quadratic function k is shown on the grid. Which statements are best supported by the graph? First, it says the x-intercept is located at -3, 0. That is where this graph crosses or touches the x-axis, so that would be correct. The coordinates of the y-intercept are 0, 9. This does cross the y-axis at 0, 9, so that would be correct. And the axis of symmetry is at x equals -3. If I drew my axis of symmetry through x equals -3, that would be at my vertex, so that would be my correct axis of symmetry. So for this one, options 1, 2, and 3 are all correct statements, so D is going to be my correct answer. So anytime you see something like that where they have a 1, 2, and 3 and an A, B, C, and D, it's easier if you will mark out or look at these options first and then see which answer choice matches what you've chosen. And the last one, number 19. Which graph best represents -x squared plus 6x minus 1? So what I'm going to do is plug that graph into y equals -x squared plus 6x minus 1. I'm going to click graph, and I'm going to look at my options. Now, if you remember, I zoomed out. So if you click zoom and 6, that will always get you back to your normal. Or you can always just reset your calculators. So I'm automatically going to mark off B and C because those aren't even facing the correct way. A and D look very similar. So a couple things you can do. What I'm going to do is go to the table and see which of these points, like this one has the point 3.8 and D has the point 3.10. So if I go to 3, the point 3.8 needs to be on my graph. If I look at it on D, 3.8 is not on my graph. So D is a little bit higher. Now this one is kind of tricky because A and D look very similar. So we can obviously cross out B and C, but we need to take just a hot minute on A and D to kind of figure out which of these is correct. Both of them have the same, or pretty much the same x-intercepts, pretty similar y-intercepts. So using the table to find a specific point is going to be your best bet there.